What's up everybody, Sam Smyers here. Today I want to show you a sound design technique inspired by camelphat and volkoder that you can use if you are making an indie dance style track. Now, the song that I'm going to use as a reference is called Unique Moment, and this style track has some worldly elements that you would probably find in an indie dance track, and both of these artists have done some tracks in that style. This song might be a little bit more main stage tech house leaning, but the lead in this song has a sound design technique that I have been noticing in other indie dance style leads. As I've been making them recently, I've been working on a new pack that has these indie dance style leads from like maccabi house artists and other artists that are getting popular within this new style. So I wanted to break down how I made this lead, remade this lead from Unique Moment, and then jump into how maybe you can use what I do in this lead in your own track, and then also some elements that I would recommend, some other things that you can do to this lead to make it more interesting for an indie dance style track. So that is the lead I want to show you how to make. Now, camelphat, I think I would think of them as lately doing the melodic techno stuff. And I'm also noticing though that the elements from melodic techno are actually transferring into indie dance. Especially there are some like bass stabs that Adam 10 is doing that I have noticed are probably from some melodic techno packs, maybe even like the melodic techno packs that I have done, because they sound really similar to those. So this lead and this drop here, not really like what you would think of for indie dance, maybe more of, yeah, melodic techno, because you do have the drums and bass, pretty just sparse kick and bass. And we can hear that bass there by itself. So let's just check out the lead. These are the notes that I have for the lead, and then I do have a pitch bend going on, so let's check out the pitch bends at the end for these notes here, like that. And I believe, let's just check the pitch bend amounts on the actual knob here. It's usually 2 and -2, so I did switch it to 4 and -4. So let me just take off the kickstart and solo this. Let's go ahead and loop that. Take off all of our effects here. And let's just start from there and bypass our main tuning there. So we do have the voicing on mono like I do for a lot of my leads. You have that choppy sound, so this release is really short. Other than that, didn't make really any other changes. Now, what I am noticing is this FM being used, but not like 2 sine waves FM, but using more of these spectral wavetables. So this is what I used. I used this odd pass spectral wavetable. And then let's see, I've got this randomness at 0, level all the way down. Didn't really want it coming through. And then I turned on oscillator B. And then I actually have this one PD from A. So PD, if you were using Serum 1, PD is actually what FM used to be. So a lot of times I do still like the sound of this, and just adjusted the phase and randomness on this one. And I did feel like the actual sound itself had a bit of width where the left and right channel sounded different enough to me where I wasn't really sure if I could just use a stereo widening plugin. And also, I was trying to use the stereo widening that was in Serum, and I wasn't really getting the result that I wanted using the hyper dimension. So what I did is I used a sine wave here and panned it all the way to the left. Now you can hear what it sounds like panned to the center. And that is pretty quiet there, but let's just hear what it would sound like if I had a sine wave again. even if I take that PD up a lot, you can hear the difference that using like one of these spectral wavetables makes. And so that is what I'm noticing in a lot of these leads, is using one of these spectral wavetables as the source for the PD or the FM. In this example, though, I did have this pan to the left and this one panned to the right, 49% and 51%. The phase amounts are different, and then I decided to use a square wave for this one. And because the actual sound was a little bit panned, a little bit not like in the center, this one I didn't have panned all the way to the right. Also, a square wave tends to be louder, like to me, when I use this wavetable. So you can hear how it just sounds a bit louder versus if I only pan it to 20 there. So that's a cool way to add a bit of this stereo width versus just putting this toward the center like that. So let's start there. Then envelope 2, I have this assigned to the main tuning. 7%. It's adding a very, very fast click. I'll raise this up a lot so you can hear what that's doing, but just a subtle attack on that initial click. Then diode distortion, drive 100%, mix 100%. And then these EQs were just to try to get it to sound similar to the original. You can EQ it how you want if you're making a lead similar to this. Then I do have my delay and my reverb, which is more of like a reverb. It's adding this low body like space to the sound by using the electric guitar cab. So to me, that sound, like that distorted, I think it's like you hear that and you wonder what type of distortion it is. And I think that using a FM source is how like you can achieve that sound. So let me just start with a new serum instance, initialize that. And we can just go into here and we can use any of these digital, we can use the spectral ones here, or even some of these weird digital ones you could use as a source, these new ones in S2. Spectral, I tend to just start with these ones. You could also go into your wavetable and create a new type of sound. So let's check this out. PD from A. And for the receiving oscillator, I tend to just stick with one of these default shapes. And even if I did want to go in and like recreate something weird like that, so this is, let's just start with you can just play your sound like that and then go into the bins here and just start clicking until it gets all weird and cool. So I could just go like this, and it'll probably create something spectral looking. Let's give it a boost up in there. Let's see, why is that so quiet? Let's do some more up in there. So you can see, just like creating the shape in my wavetable editor, I'm creating like that nasally sound. So what I've also seen, and this is a preset I'll show you that I'm working on in my indie dance pack. So this one here, I've got this custom wavetable where I'm not using the FM, but I am using something along the lines of a spectral sound. And this would be like a bass sound. I'm seeing a lot more of these like weirder wavetables in this indie dance style or the maccabi house style leads. And I think the leads are really what set this indie dance style apart. I'm working on maybe like a longer video where I'll talk more about what exactly I define as this indie dance, since it has been quite a lot of discussion around it, just because the name indie dance doesn't really make sense for this new genre that everyone is talking about. So let's say we do have a lead like this one, Unique Moment. Let's say I just switch out the drums to be something more like indie dance. Now, indie dance, I think I was just watching a Max Styler breakdown, and he was just using disco drums for his song with Kuda. And in that breakdown, I think it was with DJ Mag, he had just like disco funk drums. So I think for this style, we're getting back into using claps. Again, more like processed claps and stuff. So I think like those Oliver packs on Splice will work really well. I have this one from Mixed Roulette, who also has a pack on Splice, but this is actually from his website. So I just went through this one, and it's called the French Roulette Complete French Touch. So like, we can just start with a loop there and maybe just add on another layer for some percussion. By itself, pretty disco sounding. Maybe just add some type of bass line like this one. Not too distracting bass line, want to keep the space in there, so let's go ahead and play those together. Just doing some automation on that cutoff filter, so maybe something like that could be a bit of like an indie dance style bass line. I think there is a bit of funkiness to this one. I'm just using, I made a preset for the song Beat Goes On, and that one's really fast and plucky. So that one's the starting points, and I just modified it a bit. But then you could just throw in a bunch of these leads. So if I had something like this Unique Moment style lead, which sounds like this, right? So and yeah, I don't know, you could just play around with that, maybe just add in some other style leads to fill it in, because I do notice sometimes that there are other lead sounds within these indie dance tracks, and maybe I'll just throw in some notes in that turnaround. So could even mess around with like even the pitch bending and stuff. Let's do a pitch bend here. I don't know, maybe make that a bit hypnotic or something, but I think it's a cool starting point. So let me just take off that. I don't like that pitch bending. We could also do something where I've noticed in the indie dance leads where you have the actual tone of each note changing a bit. And I think a way to do that is if I go into the spectral here, like whatever the source is for my FM, I'm going to right click, do the mod source to be NoteOn random discrete. So then out of it, every value, if you do have wave positions that have multiple wavetable positions that have multiple wavetables, it's going to scroll through all of the different positions in here. So just watch this blue dot here. And That just like right away makes that sound a lot more interesting and cooler. I can see it jumping around all of these positive values everywhere. See, what you do need to do is you can do that way to assign it. You can also go into your matrix. You can't really adjust the amount of that modulation. So what you have to do is go into your matrix here. You can see that that new modulation has been assigned, but it's only going the positive way. If I want to go both ways, I can do that. And I can also adjust the intensity of it. So like, let's play that now. And of course, these are just the notes from the original. There's a lot of stuff going on. But here, how it almost sounds like I'm playing different notes because of that modulation. I think it actually sounded cooler when I did have it pretty intense. Something like that could be cool. So that is something also that on random discrete. That's a new thing with Serum 2. I've been trying to figure out more ways to use that as well, because that's a new feature of Serum 2 that didn't exist in Serum 1. So that is something that I can do to set up these new presets apart from the original Serum 1 presets. So if you do want to grab this preset though, you can find it in my Patreon and you can use it as a starting point and then mess around with it in your next track. And if you enjoyed this video, please go ahead and give it a like, and also please subscribe to my channel if you are not yet subscribed. And if you do want to grab any of my Serum preset packs, head on over to store.samsmyers.com.